3, I think. The nights are starting to blur together with the days. I'm not sure where I am at the moment. Well, I do know where I am. I'm north of Stewart Crossing, so I know geographically where I am. Just not quite sure, sort of epistemically where I am. Actually, I know where I am epistemically as well. What I don't know is sort of where I am. So I'm feeling a bit nihilistic is what I'm feeling. Not really nihilistic, but I was reminded of a poem that was shared to me the other day by a friend of mine called Paul, and the poem's called Ozymandias. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the camera around here so you can, well, you don't need to see me, do you? Because I'm boring, but the road's quite nice. So I was reminded of this poem as I've been driving through, because I've sort of been directed. I've got to go all the way up to the Dempster Highway, as you know, and I've been asked by the Yukon government not to stop at any sort of place other than to collect, you know, emergency provisions or whatever. But I've pretty much got everything with me, really. So I haven't, but I have been stopping on the way every now and then, just at these little random, you know, sort of interpretive things that are going on the side of the road, just because some of them afford me some nice scenery, like this one up ahead, which is very pretty, isn't it? A little bit of snow in the trees. Look, snowed last night. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. So I've been looking at some of these sort of markers, and they give the history of the Yukon, and it's quite a remarkable place, really, with the amount of effort that it must have, as you can probably see here. It goes on for miles, quite literally thousands of miles, in fact, and it must have been quite a lot of effort to run the highway in, and before that to sort of settle it in any way whatsoever. And of course, a lot of the settling was done in relation to the Hudson Bay trappers and fur trades and all that kind of stuff that I suppose started the Yukon and all that kind of stuff, mostly because of the Bering Sea and the trapping opportunities that are here. Anyway, the interesting thing about the Yukon, of course, is that as I was driving through, I passed through a place called Minot or something like that, and on the board it told me that the place was abandoned, and there was nothing there. And I thought how interesting it is that a place should have been settled for some reason back in the day, and not in too distant a past either, but back in the day, and it's now abandoned in virtue of whatever it was that took them there no longer being viable or necessary or whatever. And there's a line in this poem, Ozymandias. You see, I'm getting back to the point. There's a line in the poem: "Look upon ye mighty and despair." The poem is about Ramesses' great buildings and mighty pillars and things that he built in his day, which would have been a very fine sort of building and edifice at the time, but of course now are ruins and collapsed sort of things. And this is not much dissimilar, really, in the sense that I mean the people of the Yukon settled the place, and then it was sort of abandoned, really, and given up, and has fallen to the wayside. I mean, obviously not quite as durable as Ramesses' giant pillars, but it's certainly you know, some sort of mark upon the land by humans. And here is another one right in front of us. This road, this massive long road between here and the north, headed up to Dawson City now. It stretches for thousands of miles, and somebody had to make this tarmac and lay it and put it down and cut the swats here and put the power lines in, and you know, there's this sort of demarcation. But every now and then I pass what used to be the old highway, and it's sort of fallen into disrepair, and it's easier to see in the snow because of course the snow sort of settles on it, and you can see the path a bit, the road as it were, a little bit better than what you can just in the brush, because it's becoming grown over already. I don't know when it was abandoned, can't have been very long ago, but it's become abandoned, it's become sort of taken back, you know. It's been, the grass is growing on it and the weeds are coming through it, and every now and then there's a tree. I did drive one a bit back because I could see where it was, and it just went round a sort of a bluff rather than on the right of a bluff rather than the left of a bluff, and I drove through it, and it was, you could see where the road went off and you could just follow it, and it was almost like it was an existing road. But I went round the corner, and there in the middle of the road was a tree growing through, not a very big one, but a tree growing through the road, you know. And it's sort of these mighty edifices, this road, this mighty trail between Whitehorse and Dawson City, you know, and there's been some of it has been abandoned, and nature's taking it back, and it won't be long before it's gone altogether. So I'm in a funny sort of headspace at the moment as I look upon the magnitude and might of this territory and the terrain, and I look upon it and I say, you know, it's massive, and it's been here thousands of years. And one of the boards I read back there said a couple 100,000 years ago or something like that, this place was a sort of an inland sea, and this was a coast to the inland sea. And it was talking about the development. So geographically this is, I suppose, relatively new in that sense, but also old comparatively, I suppose, to, you know, to what we've got going on here with this bit of a road and this fancy car that I'm driving. And I was thinking to myself about this car and this road and the developments of man, and all these trees here, which will in their time, of course, drop to the ground and become sort of peat, and then maybe in the long term oil and gas or whatever. Any road, these are, you know, sort of long term things, and our usage of them, our usage of the long-termedness of the ground is fragile and imminent, you know. It's almost stoic or Buddhist in sort of its imminency, you know. It's what have we had, like 100 years, maybe 130 years perhaps of the combustion engine, maybe 120 years at the most of the combustion engine, and the use of the plastics and oils and things that which these trees will soon make, I suppose, at some stage in the future. And our life, as we know, is surrounded by this technology. It's surrounded by the use of plastics and petroleum products, and the combustion engine moving things around. I see a lot of trucks on this highway that are carting petroleum and goods and other things up and down, and it's very clear how dependent we are upon this sort of technology now. But it's only an imminent one. It'll be past in another 100 years. I imagine it'll be gone altogether, and maybe even some of the roads. I don't know what. But these sorts of things are interesting, and when you start to come up here with all this massive sort of widespread terrain, which is, I suppose I could describe it for those of you who are watching from Blighty, it's a bit like a very big Scotland, to be honest. If you've driven up and down Scotland and you pass through the islands, the highlands, not the islands, the islands, if you passed up and down the islands, then you'll be thinking they're pretty big, but I've been going through this for about 3 days, so it's a bit bigger. Any road, it's much the same, and it sort of, as I look upon it, you know, and I see this massive sort of terrain, I'm sort of belittled a bit, really, I suppose, and sort of very respectful. I had to pump some gas earlier on this morning in a place called Carmax, and for want of a better description, they had them old style Shell gas pumps, which you had to, you know, flick a lever on and you pump your own gas, but you've got to pay for it inside. So off I trotted inside, and inside they've got this wallpaper showing what I could best describe as very early settlers of the Yukon, and there was a grandma there and her son that reminded me of a friend of mine from England. He used to live next door to me, mate. Anyway, he reminded me a lot of that. So a young youth with his grandma, and the photograph looked very harsh. I mean, there was a bit of a cabin there, and grandma was dressed in any kind of bits of rags and stuff, and the son wasn't much, grandson wasn't much better. Might have been a son, but I mean, can't have been much older than sort of 14 or 16 or something, maybe 18 or 16 at the time, and things were very harsh, and I thought about the kind of life that they would have had out here, and I can't imagine what it would have been like. It must have been very harsh with the cold and the lack of provisions, and having to find eat your own salmon and whatever, make your own bread and get your flour from wherever or whatever. I can't imagine what it must have been like. And as my question at Yukon, I've no idea what it is, but every now and then you keep passing a place like that, and it seems to me like it's got a lot of stuff going on, but also not a lot. There's a big pile of scrap metal there, rusting away, and it's obviously a place that's that I've just passed that. It's probably, I bet you that's 80 miles from the last place I passed. It's the first place I've seen in an hour and a bit. Any road, there it is, and I shan't pass another one until I go into Dawson City head out, and I've no idea what it is. Some sort of, perhaps it's a pit thing or a oil rig thing or something. I don't know. Sort of, anyway. Well, these sorts of outposts, like that photograph that I saw that was printed on the wall, it's a sort of a very interesting life that they must have had out here, sat in those log cabins. Very harsh, very hard, very difficult, and I can't imagine what it must have been like, and I can't imagine why anybody would have liked to come out here. But Grandma probably didn't have much choice. I bet her husband must have decided we're going to the Yukon. I bet there was a part of the Klondike Gold Rush or whatever it is. This is where we're headed. This is the Klondike Highway, and I can't imagine for a minute this must have been a very good experience, and poor Grandma must have fella, we'll call him Frank must have said, right, we're off up to the Klondike Gold Rush, and Grandma would have probably said, are you mad? What's been going on there? It's bloody cold up there. And he says, well, there's money to be made, we'll be rich. And of course they probably weren't rich, and she was definitely not rich, and she lived in that little hut with her grandson, and heaven knows what came of him. And I wonder if he knows that he's on a wallpaper somewhere in the Carmax gas station. Very interesting thoughts, but it's making me a bit. I used to do this when I drove truck. This is not my first existential crisis. They come upon you often when you drive truck, and this is no different. So I'm sort of dropping straight back into it, really. It's almost a sort of a deep into. A friend of mine commented on a Facebook post that I posted. He's been up here too, and he was saying it's funny what the North does to you to be able to give you some focus and viewpoint and introspection, and it does. But I don't know that the North's anything in particular. It happened to me when I went south, and I've been north and south and east and west with the trucks, and all directions seem to give you that kind of. I think it's more to do with the loneliness myself. Anyway, that's that. So I'm going to shut up talking about myself now and talk very briefly about the 12 minutes of an existential crisis you've got there. But anyway, what I'm going to talk to you about now is the road. Now, you've probably seen the road isn't actually in bad nick. We've got a bit of snow here and there, and I came through a rough snowstorm last night, which gave me that sort of snow blindness thing, which is a bit of a weird experience. If you've ever driven in blowing snow, it's a bit like going light speed in the Millennium Falcon, and you lose sort of perspective, really. I can't imagine, to be honest, if you were able to travel like that in the Millennium Falcon, it wouldn't do your eyesight very good. It makes you go. Makes you a bit funny. You stop seeing the distance, and you become sort of hypnotized by these flowing snowflakes that are blinding in the light. Any road. So I had a bit of a rough do with that. We had probably about 30 or 40 minutes of a big snowstorm, and had to turn the heater up. It got chilly. It's -4 here now, but as is the way in the northern climes, and it's the same down south in Alberta where I live. It's a bit of a harsh cold, but it's not as biting as it is up in Scotland. It's not as damp, you see. Although we are near a big river, so there's a bit more moisture than there is in Lethbridge, where there isn't any moisture at all. Anyhow, what I was going to tell you is that every now and then you pass a bit of what they call fire damage. I guess, which is where they've had some fire and these trees nearby, and of course it's corrupted and damaged the tarmac. And being up here in the middle of nowhere, they don't often lay the tarmac, as you can probably see. There's just bits of old fixings that they've put in here, but every now and then you'll cross something like this here where they've had a sort of a bit more of a major construction, and they've set about it with a tarmac that's not the same as the other. I don't know why they haven't used the same type of tarmac. Probably because they can't mix it, I guess, I don't know. But any road, you cross this bit of fire damage, and they don't do a very tremendous job of sort of fixing it up. They just put another set of tarmac in on top, and put a sign at the side of it that says bumpy road, with a little bumpy sign, which they whale into ground with an hammer, and sort of leave it there really, and that's it. I don't know how long it'll be before they ever get around to fixing it. I don't suppose they'll get around to fixing it at all, because there's just not that much traffic up here to make it worthwhile, really. And so that's basically the worst part of the road. It's a little bit of corrugation like this, and there's every now and then a bit of a frost heave, but otherwise the driving's pretty good. Land Rover's returning a very poor 17 miles to the gallon. This is, as I mentioned before, and I'll just tell you just in case you've tuned into this new video and aren't familiar, but this is the P400 gas engine that they fitted. It's an inline 6 3-cylinder that's basically a BMW engine, to be honest, with some proprietary Land Rover stuff. So whether or not it'll be dependable is another matter. I'm assuming so, seeing as the Bavarian Motorworks company don't screw up very often. They have a bit of their V8s weren't very good, were they? Had a couple of dodgy V8s, but they're 6-cylinder. They do know how to make a 6, so I'm assuming this is going to be bulletproof anyway. Touch wood, it's going to be bulletproof. But it's not very good on the fuel economy. Now, I'm not entirely certain whether that's a function of all the nonsense that got bolted onto the roof rack, fuel supplies and God knows whatever else, or whether it's something to do with the road, or I'm running premium fuel today. I managed to fill up at CarMax with premium fuel. I don't normally run premium fuel, and it hasn't made any difference to the fuel economy whatsoever. If anything, it's gone worse. But it's so there you go. So 17 miles a gallon, but it is very comfortable. It is very warm, which is a significant improvement on the original Defender, which was neither comfortable nor warm. And I speak from experience here. But I can also tell you that the heating system is an improvement in the sense that it doesn't burn your right shin on the left-hand vehicles, or left-hand drive cars, or presumably your left-hand shin on your right-hand drive cars, isn't it? Because that was one of the dramas of the old Defender. In fact, the climate control system in here is a bit, here's a bit of, look, here's a flag, look at the side of the road, look, bumpy. And there you go, there it was, bumpy, fixed and bumpy. That's as much notice as you get, really. So it's nice and warm, it's comfortable. The climate control's a bit basic, but it works very well. I slept in the Land Rover last night because part of my Yukon sort of travel permit and self-isolation agreement, whatever it is that I would stay in the car and minimise my contact with precarious and remote sort of settlements, which I have done, other than fueling up. And I brought all the water I need with me, but other than fueling up and the necessities of long-durated travel, I haven't really needed to stop. So I slept in the Land Rover last night, and it was a bit chilly. It certainly doesn't keep its heat anywhere near as long as the Range Rover did, and that's probably because it's got more glass, I would say, rather than anything else. And also perhaps because I was going to string up something here. There's a bit of an affair around the rear handles of the things. I will clip imminently to a photograph or a still of the rear grab handles, holy shit handles, or whatever you want to call them. I think I might just put a bit of I've brought some rope with me, so I'll put a bit of rope there, hang a blanket off the top to keep the sun out, or the sun in, and the heat heat in and the daylight out is where I was going with that, not the sunny. But otherwise I had a very comfortable night. Now I'm not a fan of sleeping in sleeping blankets because I like to bring my knees up around my chest, and I can't do that in a sleeping blanket here. Oh, look, here's another bit of fire damage, look. And what they've done here is they've successfully repaired it by not actually bothering to repair it at all. Which is about right for the Yukon. Carry on, boys and girls, you're doing a grand job. And so I might do that tonight to see if that'll keep it a bit warmer. But Jip and I were relatively toasty. Jip slept sort of at the foot of the bed, and he's warm as toast, and he was covered by my other blanket. I've got another blanket, and so what I might do is I might just open the sort of sleeping blanket all together and have two sort of blankets, if you know what I mean, because I do like to bring my knees up around my chest. It helps me to control my body temperature better than being in a sleeping blanket, and I can't just get my knees up. Anyway, that's another story. So it was quite fine, and for those of you that are thinking about camping in your Land Rover and are saying there's no flat floor or all that kind of stuff, there's a lot to talk about whether or not the floor folds flat, and it is a fully flat. It's far too much alliteration going on here. It is a fully flat floor. Yeah, so it does, well, at least for the 5-seater. I can't speak to the 7-seater, but the 5-seater folds fully flat. The seat bases of the second row seats fold forwards, and then the other seats fold down onto them, and then you've got, I reckon, about 6 feet of usable space. And I extended I had a blow-up air mattressy thing, and that's 6'8". And when we shoved that in, it's sort of pinched a bit by the back door, or shoved up against the seat, and I slid my seat only about 2 or 3 inches forward, just to give me a little bit more room for my head, and I've got enough room to sort of stretch out without my head or my feet touching the bottom. I suppose I could if I stretched my toes out, but anyway, so that's where we are with the sleeping requirement, and there's enough room for, well, I suppose 2 people if you didn't have a fridge next to you, because I've only folded one side of the back down, and the other side has got my fridge on it and my camping equipment and all the rest of it, because there's only me and Jim, and I don't really need a bigger thing. Anyway, it worked out quite well. I've got some video footage. I did a piece to camera about that this morning, helping some people had asked me to sort of show how I'd arranged the sleeping sort of setup. So I did a piece to camera this morning, and what I'll do is I'll try and tag that with this video here. I might make a couple of videos that I've just described. Anyway, 20 minutes now. Good Lord, I've got to go because you'll be bored. Thanks for listening. Tune in, hit the like and subscribe if you do enjoy these this video vlog footage or whatever. I'm going to pass this van here and get him out of the way. Where's he from? He is from the Yukon, obviously Yukon truck. Yeah, we're going to go and we'll speak to you. It's like being on a phone, isn't it? I'll speak to you in the next video. Actually, I won't. I'll speak to you, and I won't hear from you at all. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks for subscribing and liking.